This line in the very first episode of The Owl House ended up being cheeky foreshadowing for the Collector, a child of the stars, imprisoned for hundreds of years after leading the Titan Trappers, now free to unleash chaos upon the Boiling Isles. Except not really, because the Collector didn't exist until the show got canceled. As many of you already know, The Owl House was canceled prior to the premiere of Season 2, with the second season's key visual being accompanied with a surprising announcement. The Owl House was renewed for a third season, but this third season would be the last, comprised of only 3 44-minute specials. Yeah, we've talked about this 100 times before. What I want to focus on today is how the story changed as a result of the great shortening. On an episode opposed to an Owl House talk show on Instagram Live, hosted by Sarah Nicole Robles, Cece Jones, and our homegirl Rebecca Rose, Dana had this to say about the Collector.
We always wanted to have a character like Collector, but when we had the news about the shortening of Season 3, we just thought, okay, let's throw this character in. Let's go ham. Let's just see what happens with this.
Couple this with some storyboards that don't line up with the final story, and it's clear that Season 2 went under some rewrites during production. So I rewatched Season 2, kept an eye and ear out for anything in the story that seems as if it could have been changed to accommodate the shift in story. This video is my slew of notes. Not to dwell on missed potential, but just because, as a writer, I find this stuff neat. Join me as I try to track down all the story changes in The Owl House Season 2. Rewrites for this had to occur as early as Echoes of the Past or Knock Knock Knockin' on Hootie's Door. Taking it from the top, I think it's clear from watching the first 2 episodes that both Hunter and the Blight parents were originally going to have a much larger role in Season 2. Don't get me wrong, Hunter at least plays a big role, but with everything we know now, his redemption was probably going to be a little bit more of a slow burn. As for Odalia and Alador, I think Lumity getting together in Season 2 was always an inevitability, but because of that, it would have made sense to have more drama with Luce trying to gain the Blight parents' approval, alongside their involvement in Amity and Willow's childhood friendship crumbling apart. Let's not forget that Alador's reasoning to Odalia over why Amity should keep her friends basically ended up on the cutting room floor. He didn't want Amity to maintain her friendships because she wanted to, but because he noticed that those friendships are making her magic stronger. The next time we see Alador and reaching out, he wants Amity to focus on getting into the Emperor's Coven, sure, but he never cares about the fact that Luce and Amity are dating or how Amity's friends amplify her magic. The narrative just kinda immediately pivots to Alador's a good parent, Odalia's past the point of no return, the prick. I definitely think they could have had plans for another episode or 2 with them, but it ended up getting cut in the grand shortening. Echoes of the Past has the mural of the Titan Trappers going against the Titans. It's possible that the Titan Trappers didn't always worship the Collector, or this mural could have depicted something else originally. Jean-Luc went into a dormant state at the end of the episode, but oddly never went back into action for the rest of the season. I feel like he was probably meant to come back by the season's end. Without the Collector, maybe he would have reawakened just in time for a grand confrontation with Bellows. I doubt that was the case, but could you imagine Jean-Luc making Bellows go splat? Keeping Up Appearances and Through the Looking Glass Ruins don't really have anything that indicates a rewrite. Maybe aside from the clunky writing of Lumity's B-plot in the ladder that everyone handwaves because Amity kisses Luce on the cheek. But I do want to take a moment to focus on Hunting Palisman. Hunting Palisman features the Coven heads receiving a false vision about the Day of Unity that never comes back up again, featuring the Titan's corpse transporting from the demon realm to Earth. At one point, this vision featured the Titan coming back to life, which could have been an alternative in the actual narrative that the writers ultimately decided against. Or it could have been the original fake out, the Boiling Isles merging with Connecticut remaining as the true plan, bringing magic to Earth through the Titan, but intending to kill all the witches in the process. I do think Luce and the gang winding up on Earth was always something Dana was working towards though, so maybe this was an idea they had before adding in the Collector. It's also worth noting that the Bat Queen was briefly in this episode, and she oddly had minimal screen time in Season 2, despite Season 1 setting up the mystery of her original owner. I think another story change came at the expense of her character, with an episode pushing this mystery forward getting scrapped from the season. Ida's Requiem doesn't seem to have anything that's inconsistent with the rest of the season, nothing that indicates a change in the story. But it is worth mentioning that starting with this episode, we were getting acquainted with the 9 Coven heads. This episode gave us Rain, Eberwolf, and Darius, 3 of them at once. But by the end of the season, the only other Coven heads we got to know well were Terra Snapdragon and Adrian Gray. Mason of the Construction Coven, Hetty Cutburn of the Healing Coven, Oshran of the Oracle Coven, and Vitmir of the Potion Coven all remained mute characters with no proper introduction of their own. Given their inclusion in the Season 2 theme song and slow but steady pacing of the season's first half, I'm confident that the original Season 2B was going to make room for a spotlight on all of these stylish lads. A moment of silence for the silent. Next up is Knock Knock Knockin' on Hootie's Door, which I suspect was the first big episode to be affected by story changes. When this episode first dropped, fans were surprised by how many plot threads got pushed forward in a single episode. With what we know now, that may have been because of rewrites. This episode notably has the first appearance of the Collector, Ida achieving her Harpy form, Luce and Amity becoming an official couple, and King awakening his powers. I think Ida's Harpy form and King's powers were already in this episode pre-rewrite. Status quo changing power-ups are just the Norman cartoons when they enter their second season. Obviously, the Collector was eventually added into the episode, meaning the memory of the Alpies getting cursed by them probably replaced a different version of Ida reaching an understanding of the beast. Or maybe a different scene somewhere. And I suspect Lumity got together here instead of later on in the season, so that the couple would have an adequate amount of screen time with Season 3 now taken away from them. And I know what you might be thinking, but Eclipse Lake really wanted us to know that Amity and Luce are indeed together.
And today, I'll show Luce that I am an awesome girlfriend. As Luce's girlfriend, I'm an awesome girlfriend. I'm so glad my awesome girlfriend is okay.
The relationship was the driving force behind Amity's actions in the episode. She had a beautifully animated, hype-as-fuck fight with Hunter over the portal key. Could any of this really be a result of a rewrite? Yes it could, and it is. Because these storyboards from Clouds on the Horizon, the second to last episode of the season, shows that Amity originally held onto the portal key that late in the game. It's a lie, everything's a lie, our life is a lie. So with the pivotal information that Amity had the portal key for much longer, Eclipse Lake may have been the first major episode that got noticeably affected by the Great Shortening. Even without Luce and Amity being official as a couple, Amity helping her out and embarking on a quest for more Titan's blood still makes perfect sense. Perhaps their clash should went down in an earlier draft of the episode, but with a key difference. No pun intended. Instead of Hunter threatening to harm Amity's loved ones, or at least said threat working, Amity might have called his bluff in a way that harkens back to her early Season 1 persona, leveraging her family's current association with Bellows against Hunter alongside his possession of a talisman. Don't ask me how she know about Bellows consuming talisman, this is just a hypothetical, but let's say Lilith told Luce who told Amity. That check out. I think an ending like this could have been in the cards, because Amity and Hunter walking away on equal footing better explains their next interaction compared to how things stood in the final version. Like Hunter handed over the last thing Bellows needed to claim victory. That's a pretty big deal, but in any Sport in a Storm or Labyrinth runners, Amity never brings it up. It's like aggressively glossed over. Part of Labyrinth runners was Hunter earning everyone's trust. If there was any time for this storyline to come up, it'd be right here. But the fact it didn't indicates to me that this tango originally ended a lot differently. Anyways, on to yesterday's lie. So this is an episode that I feel might have been minimally affected by rewrites. The only thing I think may have been tweaked with is the in-between realm. Given that this would become the prison of the Collector, maybe that's where the addition of those mystery whispers came into play. And that brings us to the back half of the season, which I think was probably the most reworked due to the Grand Shortening. A lot of these episodes focus on building up the Day of Unity and the Collector, who made a proper appearance by Hollow Mind. Now here's the thing, assuming the original plan for the series got trimmed down to mostly season 2, I wouldn't be surprised if Hollow Mind was the initial idea for the season 2 finale. I mean, a trip into the Emperor's mind where we learn a bulk of his backstory is as intense as you can get aside from the Day of Unity. Perhaps instead of the Collector being the grand reveal that also informs Luz, Hunter, and the audience that Hunter is indeed a Grimwalker, we could have been in store for a much darker set piece. The memory of Philip and his brother Caleb, and how Philip killed his own brother. And once season 2 was reworked, that story was instead conveyed through the paintings in the background. And Hollow Mind would be an episode that sets in motion the final episodes of season 2, rather than being the actual finale. Let me reiterate, this is all hypothetical, but really think about it. The episode ending in a relatively same place, where Hunter learns he's a Grimwalker, and the gang has to go on the lam because they know the Day of Unity's true purpose, that makes a pretty great cliffhanger for a season finale. The only thing that really contradicts this idea with the information we do have is, again, the storyboards of Clouds in the Horizon. But the order of episodes could have been rearranged once the Collector joined the fray. That being said, aside from the Collector tease and Elsewhere and Elsewhen, I'm not really sure where significant changes to the story could have happened between Follies at the Coven Day Parade and Them's the Breaks Kid. Maybe Rain learning of the draining spell and the reveal they're a double spy could have come later. After all, it does feel like the writers could have fleshed out Rain's arc a bit, and I suppose reaching out could have been a response to the shortening by speeding up Alador's arc and making sure Luz opens up about her dad. But I truly think Alador becoming the parent to break away from their toxic tendencies was always the plan. Edge of the World fits in with or without the Collector's addition to the story. Given it was set up before the Collector was even introduced, they would have just tried to kill King without a sacrifice, I guess. Because Labyrinth Runners presumably happens concurrently with Edge of the World, I don't see why it wouldn't have fit in with the original plan, even though I could totally believe both were written post-cancellation. The only rewrites I could see happening were Willow's mention of the Owl House being raided, and Hunter's reasoning for being at Hexside. Actually, I would like to believe this episode was figured out pre-Collector, because it ends with Hunter informing Hexside about the Day of Unity, and this doesn't really go anywhere. Only the characters in the theme song end up helping out in the end. Oh Titan, Where Art Thou is an episode I can't see existing before the shortening, unless season 2 was always going to end with the Day of Unity, because the entire episode is built around that event and the impending release of the Collector. Granted, the Collector only appeared for a cold open, so anything's possible. Clouds on the Horizon. Again, Amity at one point still had the portal key around her neck this late in the game. So regardless of a rearrangement, I think I have an idea of where this episode originally went. Assuming Kikimora always played a role in this episode, instead of kidnapping a Hunter mask Luz at the end of the episode, she could have gone after and escaped with Amity because of the portal key around her neck. If she didn't just originally leave with only the portal key. Remember what I said earlier about how Lumity might have gotten together earlier than intended to? If that is the case, then becoming an official couple here makes sense. Not just because of the Ghibli tier kiss, but because that victory would have raised the stakes exponentially when Kiki runs off with Amity. That really seems to be the only real payoff for Amity holding on to the key for that long, to end up in a situation where it's her and Luz against Belos, with Hunter eventually showing up to finally stick it to Belos. But since all of that places Amity in a damsel in distress role, I can see why this would have been abandoned anyways. But hey, this scenario also enforces my earlier sentiments that season 2 was originally building up a larger focus on Hunter and the Blight parents, both of which would remain the greater focus in this scenario. King's Tide is almost entirely Collector focused, and by the point they began writing and storyboarding, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they were already at the stage of working the Collector into the story, and never had a remotely realized version of this episode that didn't already include him. So I guess we're done here. Actually wait, one thing. Darius mentions in Clouds in the Horizon that Belos has replacements for all of them in the Day of Unity, but all Belos ends up doing is changing the placement, so what was this line for then? Were Grimwalkers of all the Coven heads a scrapped idea, and this line just slipped through the cracks? I want answers, Dana! But as always, I want to know what you guys think. Where do you think the story of the Owl House Season 2 changed? How do you believe it could have originally ended? How do you feel about the Collector being an addition and not something planned from the start? Let us know in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going by following us on Twitter at AllStrikeVox and at Roundtable Vids. We're also on Instagram. Be sure to check out our dope Owl House inspired merch over at Toondrip. And if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. See ya!